G'day everyone, Matty P here with another perspective, and welcome to my second video in my Nutrition 101 series. This video is called What is a Macro? We're just going to cover some of the very basic concepts around macronutrients. So let's start by giving you an idea. What is a macro? Well, basically macro is short for macronutrients. You'll see the term macro thrown around a lot in nutrition. That's typically what it's referring to. Now you have three macronutrients. Basically you have fat, you have carbohydrates, and you have protein. Now, more than likely, even if you're new to dieting, you've probably heard of these terms. They tend to be out in the mainstream a lot more these days as fitness and dieting and exercise in general, good and bad, is popularised the way it has been. Certainly even in the 10 years, sorry, I should say close to 20 years now actually, that I've been doing some kind of training. Even back when I started, it was becoming popular, but I have to admit it's really blown me away just how popular nutrition is becoming, which is why I think having someone who can present you with the right information in the right format and dispel a lot of the, like I've discussed in other videos, a lot of the misnomers and bullshit and simplify this stuff for you. I think that's why it's so important now and why there's more benefit to this nature of video than ever. So, okay, I'm sure you also hear a lot about different macronutrients in terms of people talking about how fats are bad. Now, fats aren't a bad thing. Firstly, it's important to understand these three macronutrients, our body needs all three of these macronutrients. With fats, basically, fats are a collection of what's called fatty acids, which are basically a bunch of molecules. It's a basic unit, it's basically a form of food, a form of energy that our bodies need. We need to have fatty acids. Not all fats are fats that our bodies need, but certainly you'll hear the term from time to time, essential fatty acids. Certainly things, you talk about omega-3s, which are your vegetable type fats typically. You know, you've also got omega-3s, which are your fish oils. Obviously, those are the kind of oils that you need to have a certain quantity of. They're good for you. But generally speaking, unless there's only one exception here, and let me make this clear right now, and this is the only exception: artificial trans fats. Artificial trans fats you would have heard a lot about, referred to as trans fats. There's actually artificial and natural. We're not going to worry about natural. Artificial trans fats, which are typically found in a lot of bakery products and whatnot, certainly not as much as there used to be now that there's a lot of focus on it. Companies are waking up themselves and not putting it in products, but it is a bad fat. Stay as far away from artificial trans fats as you can. Now, to have a couple of grams in something you eat isn't going to kill you by any means, but it's not natural to the body. Your body doesn't know what to do with it. So they're the only fats I say stay away from. In terms of every other fat, fats aren't bad. What people confuse with fats is the energy value. The fact is that per gram, fats have more than double the amount of energy that carbohydrates or protein does. So that's the only reason why it's easier to get fatter off fat, typically speaking, was the primary reason why it's easier to get fat off fat, because it just has a lot more energy gram for gram. There's a lot more energy in 20 grams of fat than there is in 20 grams of carbs. You take 20 grams of fats, you've got 180 calories. 20 grams of carbs, you've only got 80 calories. So you can see there, if you're eating too much fat, that it will blow out your calories. And that's the only reason you really want to obviously limit your fat, is to make sure you're not blowing out your calorie limit. As I discussed in the first Nutrition 101 video, at the end of the day, if you want to lose weight, you have to eat less calories than you burn. Now, if you're eating too much fat, because it is high in energy, it's going to make it hard. But like I say, don't exclude it. It's all about a balance. Your body needs it. It's good for your body. If you actually exclude fats and cut them too low, it can actually have bad consequences for your body. Your body uses fats in particular for men, more so than women, in the production of things like testosterone. And both men and women rely on fats and cholesterols and whatnot for healthy hormonal developments. And certainly things like fats and similar kind of substances in your body, your cholesterols and whatnot, are actually very important for growing kids. It's a very important component of providing the kind of energy and the structure your body, a growing child's body needs to develop the right way. So that's just to keep it simple. I'll leave it there. Obviously, you hear about different chains of fats in terms of short chain fatty acids and long chain fatty acids, medium chain fatty acids. Don't worry about any of that. That's not particularly important. There is those things, but they're advanced concepts. They're not going to make a difference for you. At the end of the day, what I will do actually at the end of this video as well is put up some guidelines for fat intake, just to give you an idea of the kind of guidelines. Certainly your average person who's eating, trying to eat almost no fat, bad idea. You need fat. There's no reason to cut it out of your diet. Magically, taking fat out of your diet doesn't magically make your diet a good diet. In fact, it probably makes it a bad diet. You need to have balance. But that's enough about fats. Let's leave it there and move on to carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates is obviously something your body is the primary source that your body uses for energy. Carbohydrates often is represented, on a health side or a nutrition forum as CHO, basically because it's got carbon, hydrogen and oxygen atoms in it that make up the compound that we know as carbohydrates. So, look, there is nothing wrong. I guess the thing to understand with carbohydrates is you hear a lot of nonsense about eating them before bed or at a particular time. It's all, again, like I covered in my video on calorie balance. None of that matters. It's all bullshit, okay? There's nothing about any of the three macronutrients, be it fat, carbohydrates, or protein, that's good or bad to eat before bed. Okay, at the end of the day, all that stuff comes down to calorie balance. I'll leave it there, but just understand that ultimately you shouldn't be too focused on trying to lose weight by cutting out certain, certain macronutrients. Now, carbohydrates have an energy value of 4 calories per gram, so less than half of that of fat. And it's a good idea to make sure, eat the amount of carbohydrates that help make you feel like you have the energy you need to get through your training and get through your day. I've gone through stages where I've cut carbohydrates completely out of my diet. Bad idea. You don't need to do it. There are, these ketogenic diets and whatnot around that I'll go into in some of my more advanced videos that don't really provide any advantage over normal dieting. There's a couple of things I should mention as well with carbs. Now, firstly, it's very hard on its own to put fat on from carbs. A lot of people talk about putting fat on from carbs. Now, this has been covered quite extensively in the past by the likes of Ian McCarthy with his Lifting for Life channel, and he's done a lot of work with the likes of, and done interviews with people like Alan Aragon, who have talked about, carbs around this whole, this hysteria that came about in regards to high fructose corn syrup. It was completely absurd. It wasn't based in facts or science. There are a couple of studies done that were at best questionable. That's one thing to note very quickly here as well. Just because something has a study behind it doesn't mean it should be just assumed to be the truth. There are studies and then there are studies. You have to consider that when a group that has a financial interest in a particular product or a particular field is providing data on studies, you should be very cynical. You should treat it with a bit of a grain of salt. Again, I'll mention in other videos, I'll go into more depth on that. Jason Blahar's done a great example of that recently in regards to Lane Norton, but I'll leave that there because I don't want to get off track here. So, yeah, a lot of hysteria. Basically, just the same bullshit that I've spoken about, and why people like me are doing what we're doing now with engaging with you guys via YouTube and creating YouTube fitness channels and providing information, because it's basically some very misleading people, some very dishonest people, I should say, that are basically whipping up as much hysteria, fear and insecurity as they can so they can sell books and make as much money as they can. These people should be ashamed of themselves. Obviously, the fact they're doing it, they have no shame, but it's important that you understand that a lot of this stuff is simply bullshit. Now, around carbohydrates and putting on fat, typically, if you put on weight from eating too much carbs, it's not from the carbohydrates themselves. It's very important to understand that carbohydrates and protein, when your body is digesting them, it stops digesting fat. Okay, so if you've eaten a lot of fat and you've eaten in a lot of carbohydrates or protein or both, your body will first go to break down to oxidize, which is often referred to the carbohydrates and protein in your system before then breaking down the fats. So if you've eaten too many calories, that's where fat starts to get stored as fat. So again, it really all comes down to calorie balance. If you are eating in a calorie deficit, you won't put on weight regardless of how much of those 3 macronutrients you eat and in what ratio you eat those 3 macronutrients. It's as simple as that. Now, the process of actually carbohydrates putting on fat, it can be done, but it is very, very rare. There have been some studies done that have shown that to actually put on weight, to actually produce body fat from eating excessive carbohydrates, takes an incredible amount of carbohydrate intake, much more than what people would suspect. It's a process called de novo lipogenesis. We'll leave it there. That's if you want to go and do some research on it. Guys like Alan Aragon have some great information on it. But just understand, at the end of the day, carbs are needed. Also, another thing to understand with carbohydrates, brown rice versus white rice, brown bread versus white bread, makes no difference. Your body cannot see the difference between a molecule of sugar, a carbohydrate molecule in a form, from brown bread to what it can from white bread. Okay, this is the ridiculous thing about all these labelling of clean and dirty foods and good and bad foods. Most foods aren't good or bad. Any food in the wrong quantity is bad. Any food in the wrong quantity that has a calorie value, as I mentioned, if you eat enough of it to put you in a calorie excess, will put on weight. But beyond that, you need to forget about a lot of these labels. If you like white rice, go and eat white rice. It's not going to make any difference from eating brown rice. It really isn't. In fact, the protein in white rice, generally speaking, is of a higher quality and higher bioavailability. Bioavailability basically means that your body is able to better use more of the protein in it. So forget about it. At the end of the day, again, and this I'm going to keep reinforcing this, if your calorie balance is such that you're eating less than you're burning, you can eat all the white rice and bread in the world, you'll still lose weight. In terms of losing weight, it makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. Anyone who says it does is talking out their ass. And I challenge anyone to be able to provide some credible scientific data to prove otherwise. The fact is they won't. So that's just very important to remember, okay, in terms of the type of carbohydrates. Even sugar. There's nothing wrong with sugar. Now, again, I guess the thing with carbohydrates is understanding that different carbohydrates do take a different amount of time to break down. Now, if all of your carbohydrates come from sugar, which is obviously the simplest form of carb and is very easy for your body to break down, you probably find that you'll get big spikes of energy, and it'll be maybe hard to maintain your energy in the longer term. So that's where I'd recommend, not paying attention to good or bad, but really around energy. There's nothing wrong with sugar. Have a bit of sugar, but also have some carbohydrates that are more complex carbohydrates that take a little bit longer to break down, purely so that you're actually balancing out your energy over the course of the day. Okay, you don't want to be eating something that goes bang, all your energy bang down like that in terms of your carbohydrate intake. It doesn't make a lot of sense to do that. And that's pretty much the same as I've mentioned in my first video about eating. It's all about doing it in such a way that best suits you, that allows you to eat within your calorie limit and perform all the type of activities that you want to perform, be it exercising, going for a walk, whatever it happens to be. So I hope that gives you a bit of an insight in terms of that, in terms of carbohydrate consumption. Now, last but certainly not least is protein. Protein is obviously made up of essential and non-essential amino acids. Now, proteins, amino acids, are one of the building blocks for the human body. It is used for repair, for growth, a whole lot of bodily functions around that type of thing. So obviously when you people who are bodybuilders and who are trying to maintain lean muscle tissue, which is basically muscle fibers which are made up of protein and water, you give your body lots of protein that are broken down to amino acids, which is what your body actually uses in the muscles to repair and grow it. Obviously people consume a lot of this macronutrient for that reason, because it does help to, your body needs it to repair and grow. Obviously if you're doing things like bodybuilding or high intensity sports where your body's having demands placed on it above normal in terms of growth and in terms of repair, then you need to eat more protein. Now the general rule of thumb I will give is that a recommended minimum protein intake for your average person that's healthy is around about 1 gram per pound of body weight. You could probably even do 1 gram per kilo of body weight, and that would be fine too. But look, 1 gram per pound of body weight is more than adequate. It's not too much. There's a lot of misinformation out there about protein damaging your kidneys. Now, certainly if you have a pre-existing kidney problem, you have to be very careful, and certainly don't take my word for it. If you have any suspicion whatsoever that you do, you need to go and speak to a doctor about that. Certainly any of this advice I give is, scientifically accurate, but at the same time, it's provided without warranty. I don't want you guys, making arbitrary decisions about your own health in terms of, whether if you think there's something going on, and make sure you go talk to a doctor at the end of the day. Now, I've taken absurd amounts of protein. I don't have any kidney problems. I regularly get blood work and whatnot done just to keep an eye on my health and make sure everything's good. I did it at the beginning of the year. Everything had been fantastic, and I've regularly been eating much more than 1 gram per pound of body weight. So just be aware. A lot of this stuff about protein being dangerous is overstated in a major way. It's simply not going to be dangerous to the vast majority of people if they're sticking to a figure of around 1 gram per pound of body weight a day. And even a bit more than that, it's not going to hurt you. So that's just something to be aware of. Now, another thing as well with protein, people will talk about the thermogenic benefit of protein. Of course, the whole thermo thing being around the law of thermodynamics in terms of what I mentioned with calorie balance. Basically, food energy that we measure in terms of calories being the unit that we measure food energy with. Food energy is a representation of heat energy. So that's why when you hear a lot of stuff around nutrition and the energy from food, you hear about thermal. So just be aware of that. Don't let it intimidate you or confuse you. Now, yeah, as I say, you would have heard a lot of talk, or you may have heard a lot of talk, depending on how new you are to this and what research you've done already, around the thermogenic effect of food, or TEF. Now, just to stick to the topic of this video, basically protein is thought, there's been a lot of data come out in more recent years from studies done to show that it appears the body takes more energy to break down protein and utilise it as energy than it does the other two macronutrients, being fat and carbohydrates. Now, the energy value of protein is the same as carbohydrates. It is 4 calories per gram, so that's a little less than half of the energy that you get from a gram of fat, just to put that in perspective. Consider for a second that you've got 100 grams of protein and 100 grams of carbs. In theory, they're both 400 calories. It does appear from the data that's coming out more recently that by virtue of the fact that protein does actually take more energy for your body to break down and use as energy than, say, carbohydrates, the net effect is that it's actually less than 4 calories per gram. Don't pay any attention to that at the moment. That's more just a little tidbit for your own interest's sake. It is. I find this stuff fascinating. I dare say a lot of you will as well. But assume it's 4 calories per gram. Continue to assume it is for the foreseeable future. It's unlikely it's going to change anytime soon. There is some contention about whether they should change the calorie value of protein to be more representative of this fact. But you know what? Until there's more data out and more consensus in the scientific community, you're only going to confuse yourself and make your dieting harder. So just forget about it for the moment. It's just, I like to throw some of this relevant data out there, and obviously if you want to go out and have a look yourself, you can, or if you want to ask me some more advanced questions that you think are going to be helpful to be covered in a video, then that's something I can also look to do. I obviously can't answer every query, but I'll always do my best to try and make videos that answer everyone's questions as much as I can. So anyway, look, that's it for macronutrients. I hope it gives you a good grounding for what they are and their energy value, and just a few guidelines around what you should and shouldn't be concerned with around their consumption. Like I say, with fats do have a higher energy value, but they're not bad. Your body needs them. Carbohydrates, doesn't matter whether you eat them before bed, when you're standing on your head, when you're bloody sitting on the bathroom, there may be hygiene issues or anything. It doesn't matter. Okay, white or brown, doesn't matter. At the end of the day, stick to your calorie limit and you'll be fine. Same goes with protein. Proteins, 1 gram of protein per body weight probably isn't going to kill your kidneys. For most people, it will have no negative effects whatsoever. It's something your body needs. Don't be afraid of it. Typically, a lot of the guidelines that are published in places like Australia for recommended amounts of protein intake are far lower than they should be. Okay, so anyway, I hope you've gotten value out of this. I've discussed the principles that you guys need to understand and try to keep it simple. If you've got any other further questions relating to any of this, please let me know. and do provide feedback. I'm actually someone who takes the time to answer all questions. Sometimes it takes me a bit longer than I plan, but whether it be via video or via direct reply to you, I'll make sure I answer your questions. So hope you enjoy the video. Until the next Nutrition 101 series, enjoy your day.